Hello and welcome to episode 129 of the Midweek Bible Study. Hope everything is going well. Hope things are going good your way. We appreciate you being here, whether you watch it with us right now or whether you watch it later on. Hope you know that you're appreciated. We love you and we thank you for taking your time to study with us. We are. It's been a pretty good day, down here. It's still a little bit chilly. We're getting into that winter time, but some of the leaves are changing pretty good, and that's always beautiful to see. You see all the reds and the golds and all that. That's a good sight to see. One of the better things about fall is those leaves changing colors and kind of getting to where they look really nice. And so maybe you've been able to get out and enjoy some of those. But as we always do, we want to extend you an invitation. If you're in the Portia area, we hope you can come and see us sometime. We are located at 307 South Jackson Street in Portia, Arkansas. And right now, we are meeting at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings. 10 o'clock for Bible class, 11 o'clock for worship service, and Sunday night is 5 o'clock, and Wednesday night is 6 o'clock. And so, hope you can join us one of those times if you're someone who is in the area. We would love to see you, love to worship with you, and be able to study with you. It's always good to see new people. It's always good to worship you with your fellow Christians, and so we hope that you can take advantage of that opportunity if it's something that if you're in the area. I think right now we are teaching a class on. I think we're starting a new class this Sunday. I think it's going to be on the prophets, some of the lesser known prophets. I think this Sunday is Obadiah, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't know a whole lot about Obadiah, so that's going to be a good opportunity to study that. And on Wednesday nights, we're going through the book of Matthew. We're on chapter 21 right now. And just got through talking about how Jesus entered the city and how he rode on a colt, and the crowd, shouted Hosanna to the Son of David, and how they celebrated his entrance into the city. And so that's been I think that's been a great study as well. And so you can join us in one of those nights. Hope that you can be there with us. And also, let's see here. What else do we got? If you have any suggestions for future episodes or anything of that sort, then feel free to get in contact with us. We would love to talk with you and love to hear what you have to say about what we studied tonight. That's always a good thing to hear. Either you put your comments down, or whether you get it to us later, we'd like to hear what you have to say. And so know that you have that available to you as well. But tonight we are going to take a look at Mark chapter 14. Mark chapter 14, and a scene that it's a pretty interesting story. A scene in which something of great value was placed on something with even greater value, as we'll see here in Mark chapter 14. And so let's bring that up here, and we'll read it together, and see if we can learn some things from this story here. Mark chapter 14 is where we're going to be, and starting in verse 3. And this is what Mark has to say as he records this. In verse 3 it says, "And while he was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he was reclining at table, a woman came with an alabaster flask of ointment of pure nard, very costly, and she broke the flask and poured it over his head. And there were some who said to themselves indignantly, 'Why was the ointment wasted like that? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor.' And they scolded her. But Jesus said, 'Leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a beautiful thing for me. And for you always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them. But you will not always have me. She has done what she could, and she has anointed my body beforehand for burial. And truly I say to you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her.'" And so we have this scene here in which Jesus is at Bethany, and It says that while he was at Bethany in the house of a man by the name of Simon the leper, and there is there's some people who think that this Simon the leper is the exact same person that we read in other accounts of the Gospels, who's referred to as Simon the Pharisee. And it's interesting that if you kind of dig deep into who this person is. It may be two different people, and it may be the same person. We know that he's referred to as Simon the leper, and leprosy, as you know, the term used for leprosy can be a term used for many different medical conditions, mainly skin conditions. There are many different of diseases that can be classified under the umbrella of leprosy, and so it wasn't always the highly contagious, very destructive, kind of leprosy that we read about in other accounts, where lepers had to isolate themselves. They had to, something that deteriorated their body into where they eventually they lost control of all their limbs and such. And so that was an awful, a terrible disease, but sometimes it meant other things as well. I mean, you think back to Naaman. Naaman was someone who didn't seem to have that same type of leprosy, and so some people think that this Simon was a former leper and he was healed by Jesus and now was a Pharisee. Um, some people think these are two different people. So it's hard to say, but he was if he was someone who if he did have maybe a non-contagious version of leprosy, then it would still be unusual for him to be hosting a party or for him to be hosting a gathering at which Jesus was at. But yet he was still there, and he was offering this and he was hosting Jesus here at this case. And it says, while they were in Bethany in the house of this Simon, he was reclining, at table. When they didn't have, usually and typically within their culture, they didn't have, a dinner table, and chairs and things, like we do. We always, sit down, at a table, and they would also oftentimes have like a low table, like a floor level table, and they would get on their side and recline at it, and that's how they ate their meals. And so they were reclining at this table, and while they were here and while they were enjoying this meal, it says a woman came with an alabaster flask of ointment of pure nard that was very costly, and she broke the flask and poured it over his head. And an alabaster, usually the best way, the way to preserve the most value out of perfume during that time was to seal it in alabaster. At least that's what I read. And this was a way to preserve it, even though once you kind of broke the seal, once you kind of broke it open, it was hard to preserve it after that. But this was something that was extremely costly. As you see the text here, make sure to tell us that this was something that was, very costly, very expensive. And we'll see later on, the disciples were people who knew this, who knew this as well. And it says that this was something that was sometimes passed down, from generation to generation. Mother might give her daughter, a flask of ointment or a flask of perfume, and because these were so valuable and they were kind of easy to carry around, these were oftentimes great. They stored a lot of value as far as being able to trade things. And it says that she broke this flask and she poured it over the head of Jesus, and which is interesting, as I said before, because this is something that is so valuable, and she takes it and she pours it on the head of Jesus. And we always ask the question, if you're going to put a value on something, you know, how much value would you give to Jesus? How much value would you give to what he did, for us? You can't put a number on that. You can't put a value on that, because nothing, the entirety of the riches of the world wouldn't even come close to comparing to the value that Jesus is. He gave us something that absolutely nothing in this world, could have, and that was salvation. That was hope. That was freedom, from sin. And he did that, because of his love, not because, he owed us anything, not because we were worthy of something, but because, he loved us. And that was, it's truly remarkable, when you think about it. You think about the parable, that Jesus tells, where there was, two servants who had a great debt, and the one owed, it was, thousands and thousands of talents, more money than he could ever pay off in 100 lifetimes. That's how much we owe God, and that's how much, we are in debt to him. But yet he still died for us. You cannot put a value, on, or a number on, just how valuable, Jesus is. And yet, this woman who is identified as Mary, and I think in the book of John, in John's account of this, she's identified as Mary, which makes sense because they are in Bethany, where Mary and Martha lived. And so this was, likely the case. And so she takes this, and as you said, once you broke that seal, this was kind of a irreversible thing. But she takes it, she breaks the seal, on that perfume, and she pours it over Jesus' head, and she anoints him. Gives him it's kind of an anointment, for burial that Jesus was going to very, very soon, take place, because this takes place, in the final week of Jesus's life. And so, and I believe that he mentions this up in, it says, and there was now 2 days before the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and up here in verse 1. And so it was this was going to happen, very soon. So this was a wonderful act, that this woman did. But yet not everyone was happy about it. Not everyone was pleased with what she did. In fact, it says here in verse 4, there are some who said to themselves indignantly, "Why was the ointment wasted like that?" They said, it's kind of weird to kind of get into this frame of mind, but they said, this is a waste. They were angry, that they were mad that this happened, because they said, why was this, expensive perfume, wasted in such a manner? They simply did not understand, what was, going on, and they thought that this was something that was, too good, essentially, for Jesus, and that this is something that shouldn't have taken place. And the reasoning for this, down in verse 5, here they say, "For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor." And they scolded her. And so, as we know, a denarius is the average you pay for a day's labor in that time. And so this is almost a year's worth of work. If you worked, I think, was it 365 or 64 days in a year? 300, you work 300 days. And, that's how much, that's the amount of money that this is it's worth. And so you think about that in our terms, if you make, 30,000 or 40,000 a year or 50,000 a year, just a little bit below that, that's how much this cost. This was very, very, very expensive. And they say this could be sold for 300 denarii and, given to the poor. And so they're saying this could have been put to much better use than just, pouring it over Jesus, like this. And what compounds this is that it says that they scolded her. Down here at the end of the verse, down here at the end, it says, and they scolded her. which is, she goes and does this, this beautiful, this wonderful, this amazing thing, and she sacrifices, this incredibly valuable, item that she has. And as soon as she gets done, she is scolded for it. She is, facing, angry people who are criticizing, what she has done. That's that is, kind of hard to understand, at times. But we know that one of the people that was angry at this, was Judas, and we know that he had other motives. He wasn't really all too keen on giving to the poor, but he kind of siphoned, some off the top as far as uh, keeping charge of the money, and so he had some unethical practices. But she does this wonderful thing, and she gets, scolded for it. And we don't know what her reaction was. We don't know that she may have, you began to think, did I do something wrong, or did I, do something that, wasn't right? They criticize her for doing something, that was great. But fortunately, for her, Jesus comes to her defense, and rightly so. In verse 6, it says, "But Jesus said, 'Leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you. Whenever you want, you can do good for them. But you will not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for burial. And truly I say to you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her.'" See, Mary, in this case, understood something a lot better than the disciples did. The disciples were in denial of what Jesus was going to go through all the way up until the crucifixion. You know, they said, Jesus, you're not going to die. You're not going to be arrested. You're not going to go through these things. We're not going to let you. They were in that denial. But Mary, she realized that what Jesus said was going to come to pass. What Jesus said was going to come true, because his word was, he never lied. He never deceived them in any way. And so she knows that this is going to take place, and so she seizes this opportunity. She takes the initiative, to perform this great act. And Jesus says down in verse 9, he says, "I tell you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her." Her legacy, part of her legacy was, this anointment, this display of honor that she has. And it'd be her legacy. Even here today in 2022, we're still talking about her. We're still talking about what she did, over 2,000 years ago, which is kind of speaks to the monumentous nature, of what she did. But Jesus said, don't trouble her. She has done a beautiful thing. You will always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them. But you will not always have me. Did Jesus care for the poor? Is what Jesus is saying here is that we shouldn't care for the poor, that we should, put, helping people on the back burner? Well, no, that's not what Jesus is saying. He's someone who cared for the poor. He cared for the misfortuned, many times, throughout his ministry. He always did that. But he says, you will not always have me. You will not always have me here. And he knew that, like I said, this was the final week, and so that he would be departing very, very soon. Are we a people that treasure our time with Jesus? Are we someone who treasures our time and that we get to worship? Sometimes it's easy to take that for granted. Sometimes it's easy to kind of get in auto mode and kind of just go through the things that we do. But do we treasure the time that we have to spend with Jesus and with his church? Do we treasure that? Are we someone who is distracted by the things of this world, or even things that are essentially good, things that are maybe not bad in of themselves, but if we let that distract us from Jesus and following him and lifting him up and being someone who treasures our time with him. We can't let a good thing distract us from the greatest thing, which is Jesus. And that can be easy to do sometimes. You can get so bogged down in the little things that you forget to look up at the one who has blessed us. And so Jesus did care for the poor. He did want us to look after them. As James says, pure religion is to is to care for those widows and to care for the orphan. She this was something that she would be remembered for, because of what she did. And it's kind of a amazing thing to see here with with what she did. And we know that Jesus was someone who was absolutely absolutely worthy of this, and what was given to him. Like, whenever you give something to Jesus, whenever you send something his way, that's never wasted. Especially when Jesus was there with them, and she knew that this wasn't going to last forever, that he was going to be leaving you pretty soon. Whenever you give something to Jesus, whether it be your life, whether it be your time, whether it be your energy, your effort, whatever you send his way, that's not something that is wasted, but that's something that is always a good use of our time. To be someone who looks to him in that manner and gives what we can. And we should always be mindful, I think, not to criticize a good deed that is done. And we you may be like the disciples here, and you may think in your mind of better uses, maybe for resources, or better uses for this, that, and the other. But this was Mary's to give. This was her thing to give, and she had the ability to do whatever she wanted with what she had, and she chose to give that to Jesus. And so we shouldn't be someone who criticizes, even if we think that there's a better use for it in our mind. We shouldn't criticize other people for doing what they think is right, and for looking to Jesus. And because this was a wonderful thing that that she did. And in the house of Simon, you can bet that, I think in the account in John, I think it talks about how the whole room was filled with this fragrance. Like, what she did wasn't done in secret, but everyone knew what she had done for Jesus. And so it was definitely something that she would be remembered for. And so I hope this is something that has benefited us tonight. I think there's maybe a couple of things we could go over, but I think this is a good place to stop here. As we know, speaking about Judas, if you go down to the section just under this, and we see the episode in which Judas seeks to betray Jesus, and eventually the Passover when he actually does. And so you can kind of see the character of Judas degrade to the point to where he eventually goes through with this act of betrayal on Jesus, which leads to the very end, as we know. But as I said, I hope this is something that's been beneficial to you. Hope that you had a wonderful week, and we'll see you again here next time. We at the end of December, we are going to have our winter break. We always have our summer break in June. When I leave for church camp, we always take off a couple of weeks then, and we always take off a couple of weeks in December as well. And so we'll be doing that at the end of the month, around Christmas time and around New Year's time as well. But we'll have an episode next week, and so I hope you can join us then. Hope you can be with us. We always appreciate everyone who watches and who shares it with those who could use it. But until next time, we hope that you have a wonderful week. Hope that you be someone who can be the light of the world and glorify God in everything that you do. Catch you next time.